here we are, and welcome to another South by Southwest special from the Friday Night Movie Podcast. Today, we have something quite amazing. We are going to speak to Toby Amies, the director of a film that Variety just gave a stellar review to and called Near Perfect. I think most people who see this movie are going to call it a perfect documentary about the band King Crimson, Into the Court of the Crimson King, where Toby Amies manages to open the doors on one of rock's most elusive and complex characters, Robert Fripp, which is just amazing work, I think, as a documentarian, but also there are beautiful and warm interviews with so many of the different musicians that have come through this band that is known for its, I would say, complex math rock, but the beauty that they see in the music really shines through. Notably, Bill Rieflin, who I was a fan of through his work in REM and had a chance to even meet him once. And the fact that Toby captures some incredible moments with him is just a huge, huge accomplishment. So Toby Amies, congratulations on the film and the reception that it's getting. And thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you very much, Shai. Can I just check, is it right if I smoke in your house?
Yeah, well, virtually, yes, that's totally fine.
Okay.
Virtually,
right, I'll continue to do so.
And you know, if you're willing to talk to us about the film, believe me, there's a lot.
There's a lot of rules we could bend for you.
There's a lot of rules we'll let you. There's a lot of things we'll let you do. So,
thank you.
I'd love to start with the overall approach you took to storytelling in this film. I think that there are more and more these days, especially with the way commercial things work, there are rock documentaries that read kind of as propaganda films. I won't mention who they are, but there are certain times when the artist is involved where it turns out fine, and there are other times where the artist is involved and you're kind of suspicious about what was allowed. You paint this incredible complex picture that is, you know, far from like I said, a propaganda piece, but it also captures this beautiful essence. And at times it's adversarial. It looks like you're taking a beating from your subject in Robert Fripp, who's almost like trying to outsmart you and undo you at different times during the film. How do you go about cracking the nut, opening the door, getting the subjects to trust you and open up?
You know that bit in The Silence of the Lambs where Clarice Starling goes to interview Hannibal Lecter, and he basically says, if you give me a piece of you, you can have a piece of me. I sort of
that's amazing.
I'm not going to draw a comparison between Hannibal Lecter and any of my subjects.
No.
I'm not going to draw a comparison between Hannibal Lecter and any of my subjects. But I think you have to. I think if you're going to somebody and you're asking them to give you something that will become part of your creative process, your art, if you like, and you want them to give you something that is meaningful and true and personal, then you have to be prepared to do the same yourself, more than, I think. And that's the sort of so it's very important for me to create a basis of trust in my subjects, and that can have to do with what you're willing to give them, what you're willing to expose about yourself, and above all, it's about recognizing that there's a vulnerability people get when they begin to feel that you might see who they really are, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the most beautiful thing to put on screen is people as they are, you know. That's, you know, the sort of that you see people's unique humanity, and at the same time, you know, in a crazy way, it's the uniqueness that is universal. That's where we start to recognize similarities between other people and ourselves. Is when you see the true person on screen. So because that's what I want, I'm willing, I suppose, to be pretty diligent and patient in getting that, because so much of what it is about is not about the actual filming. It's about the relationships that you develop. So I guess that's how it works when it works. It doesn't always work. Some people won't want to talk to you, and some people won't want to open up.
Well,
they will do that over time.
It works tremendously here. Sorry, Becky, go ahead.
So on that note, you build the trust with your subjects, I see, because you're also willing, as you explained, you're willing to give something of yourself. But over the course of a project, I don't know how long it took you to film this, but I imagine quite some time. What is their motivation for getting involved in it? And then how do you sustain that throughout the course of filming so that you can continue to dive deeper with them?
I think that, there are so many individual characters in this movie that it's hard to make a generalization about, what they all want to get out of it. But broadly speaking, and this doesn't just apply to the members of King Crimson, everybody wants their story to be known, I think, in one way or another. So if you create an environment in which they feel like they're going to get a fair shout, as it were, then they're more inclined to give you a story. I suppose that King Crimson is a commercial entity as well as an artistic entity. So it that the same reasons that they would allow me to film them for the documentary would apply to the same reasons why they might do an interview, with Rolling Stone or the NME or something. So there is that kind of basic default. And then somebody said after the screening last night something that was really nice. She said it's less, they're less interviews than they are conversations. And that's a technique I picked up at MTV, I suppose, because, when I was a video jockey, you're on screen with your subjects. And so you're sort of put on this slightly more equal footing, although I've got to, I want to make clear that compared to being somebody who's really good at playing the guitar, being a stupid video jockey is not really on a par in my I don't think there's similar achievements.
No, but we do miss the VJs. The days of the VJs were very important to us, so don't undersell it.
Yeah, it's really nice when culture is contextualized in that way. I think I sort of, there are certain VJs I really don't miss, and some of them personally I really don't miss. But yeah, so there's something nice about having a human context for the music and stuff. But anyway, yeah, so oftentimes, rather than sitting there going, tell me about your new album, or, where'd you get your ideas from, or how did this album come to be, or whatever, you just have a conversation. And I think a crucial part of having a conversation and being, if you like, a good conversationalist is remembering to shut up and listen. And there's a certain amount of that I do. It's like I wince when I listen back to the stuff I shot, because I feel like I'm constantly interrupting people and talking over them and stuff. But part of that is conversations. This happens with human beings, normal conversations. We're always talking over each other. But so sometimes you just have to go, I'll just wait and see what happens.
At the risk of talking over both of you, I do want to say that
talk over me. It's great.
I truly enjoyed the choice to include your voice in the film. And it's actually not something I see very often in the documentaries I watch, where you hear the filmmaker's voice in those in conversation and asking the question so consistently. Like, you might hear a clarifying word, and a lot of the times, it's just that direct to camera, as if they're talking to the audience. And I actually think it brought so much intimacy and brought you closer to the characters to be having those conversations through you with your voice. And so I just wanted to say how much I appreciated that choice, and hearing you speak about it. It all ties together so well, and it makes so much sense why you would do it that way.
And I'll add the vulnerability that you show. It's not like you only showed clips of yourself being the best interviewer ever, you're a great interviewer, But you saw these moments where I think if I were talking to one of my rock heroes and I didn't ask the right question and they stuck it to me, I would be mortified. And you did it fearlessly when you sort of jostled with Robert Fripp a couple of times. And I thought that was a beautiful and brave and very, very humanizing move that you did.
Cheers. I think that are you guys familiar with the films of Ross McElwee?
I am not. Becky might be. She's much.
What are the titles? I don't know. I'm not the best doc
Sorry.
filmmaker. I'm not going to lie.
Oh, Toby, we lost you there for a second.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, back again.
Okay. So it's Sherman's March is ostensibly about General Sherman's march through the South. It's a historical documentary. I think he got some money from the Smithsonian for it, and but then it starts with him saying, "I've got this." You see him wandering around this loft. He's got this very laconic voice, and he sort of talks about how he also just got dumped by his girlfriend, and so he's much more concerned about being alone and lonely and wanting to be in a relationship again than he is about what he's meant to be doing. And that film's always been. I saw that film when I was 21 or something, and it's just such a beautiful film. But it's like the thing that he gets so right, is the balance of telling you enough about him that you're kind of immersed in it, but at the same time, it's not one of those on my journey I wanted to discover sort of things. And so I've sort of stolen a bit of Ross McElwee's approach, and then I paired. The goal for me is always to have as little of me as possible in the film, but on occasion, it's very handy to have a bit of me, because I think it's my job in that context to sort of act as the audience would.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody really thinks of themselves as superhuman and never making any mistakes. So you're right, it's really painful to put in the mistakes. But I think it makes for a better film where you sort of, the sort of flaws and so on are part of the process. And it's like, I don't go into these films thinking I know it all, I sort of go in like when I started making this film, I hadn't listened to all of the albums, I hadn't read the big biography and so on, because I wanted to sort of be, not only did I want to avoid doing the work, I also, conveniently, simultaneously, it meant that I sort of entered that space as somebody who didn't really know much about the band, so that some of the questions are really kind of, from the musician's point of view, they're like, how many fucking times have I answered this question before? But it's sort of like, I made the film for people who don't know about King Crimson, really.
Well, I would
for
say,
them and for fans, so.
Oh, sorry. Oh no, I was sorry, the delay there. But I would say, I love music docs, rock docs, whatever you want to call them. I think the best ones are the ones that cover the rudimentary, such that anyone who has never heard the band in their life will come away intrigued and invigorated about learning more about this band, but that the old fans won't come in and say, I've heard this all before. And again, I don't want to speak, you don't have to speak ill of your colleagues, but I would say, for example, I feel like Scorsese's No Direction Home, to me, was a lot of very good interview gets, but it didn't tell anything new as a Bob Dylan fan for me. And so I was watching this very long documentary, but it was hitting the usual beats of folk to going electric. Right. I'm not a King Crimson, ologist, but I felt like, I don't feel like I was just getting the typical King Crimson, and that had to do, I think, with your choice to, I read that you've said that your choice not to do this as like the chronological story, but have it be built more around the interviews and the insights from the humans. I compare that to one of my favorite rock docs, which is Beyond the Lighted Stage, the film about Rush, but this is on equal footing in greatness, if not more. And but why choose? your choice of that style to tell the story that way. I'd love to know more about choosing that style. Like, you are taking a band that maybe not a lot of people have heard of. The hardcore fans will show up, I'm sure, but you're taking it away from that much more simpler album by album approach that makes a Beyond the Lighted Stage very accessible.
Well, I'm not interested in like filming a Wikipedia article, and I figure that, like, if you want, if you want to know the history of King Crimson, Sid Smith, literally wrote the book on it. He wrote a brilliant, very long, in-depth tome, which is both satisfied and annoyed people in enough measure that that there's a lot of truth in it. And so that already exists. And it's one of the maxims of cinema is show, don't tell. And I'm not interested in telling people what to think, and I'm not interested in telling people something that they already know or something that they can find out in 2 minutes on the internet. There's no point in that. What I want to do is put on screen things that sort of resonate with human beings, and even if they don't specifically, tell you everything you need to know, in a sense that you get the experience of something, and you understand things from watching how and where people say things as much as what they're actually saying, and so on. So, and when Robert and I spoke about making the film originally, he was like, I don't want to see a bunch of old farts, sitting down talking about the bad old days or whatever. As he said, those kind of films, it feels like the dead have been brought forth and remain unburied. So, and what I think is totally brilliant about the current iteration of King Crimson is they're all getting on. I'm 54 and I think, my back hurts, and it's just, lots of things. I sort of think twice about getting a low angle shot now because I don't want to have to get up again and so on. And these guys are older than me, and they're doing this work, which is incredibly complicated, and it's so draining, both psychologically and physically, that, I was sort of open-mouthed in awe of not only their skill, but also their diligence and their perseverance and their stamina, to be able to do it. It's quite a thing to watch. And I think you learn so much, rather than, knowing that Mel Collins also played with Camel and Dire Straits and so on, seeing him get on the bus, and carrying his own luggage and stuff, and hearing the effort that involves, it tells you so much about what he's going to do when he goes on stage and plays for 3 hours, and being short of breath.
That's so true, and that is so much of why I think this brings so much to the conversation about them. It allows us to see so much more. There's this moment at the beginning. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I feel like there's a bookend in the film. Early on in the film, there's this almost like meditation from the different musicians on silence, and the conversation about not getting in the way of the music versus just not getting in the way of yourself. And then towards the end of the film, there was this remarkable moment where I actually wasn't sure if the stream had messed up on my phone or on my device, because you ask Robert Fripp a question about his conversation with a mentor when he was getting into school, I believe. And it hangs in silence just on his face for what felt like an eternity. And the patience that you had there felt like you were almost showing us that you were, I wouldn't say learning, because it sounds like you knew this, but you understood what they were saying, and you were doing the filmmaker version of what the musicians did. Am I reading too much into it, or am I on the right track?
I think you're sort of on the right track, because my default position is I don't really know what I'm doing. And any time I go into a situation going, right, I'm going to do this, it goes horribly wrong. So I'm sort of slowly learning that the best thing to do is be open and be adaptable. and sort of as as ready as possible. Things, but I'm not there to impose my thoughts or even my aesthetic necessarily on other people. I just think that, like, when I was making my first feature film, the Man Whose Mind Had Exploded, a friend of mine said to me, she said two things that really resonated with me. Her name's Dolly Thompson. She was an artist. She was a painter. She is an artist. But she said to me, she said, it's your job as an artist to change the shape of the medium that you work in. And she also said, you're working with an extraordinary subject, and you should let him be the guide as to the shape that your film makes. It's like form follows function. And with this film, I enormous ego and just sit there and listen and be prepared for eventualities. I'm not saying, you referred to me as fearless over there. I was absolutely terrified when I was experiencing that thing with Robert, because I didn't know what was going on, and so it's just a question of sort of like, without making the film sort of deadpan, I need to just let the camera sit and observe as much as possible, and not intervene necessarily. But throughout that whole thing, I wanted to say something.
So
for once, I shut up.
I think it's for a band that makes so much complex music. That moment of silence is a defining moment in the film. I think I assume you're going to be getting questions about it.
Yeah,
from everybody. Before we go to our games, I'd like
probably there was a brilliant bit.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I didn't say anything. I'm waiting to hear what Becky said.
Oh, yes, Becky's question, and then we'll play some games. The sibling bickering is the best part of the show. People tune in for that.
We're on such good behavior.
You've never seen this group behave this way.
Yeah.
It's like there's a real adult in the room.
What's the most annoying thing about Shai?
This is great. We have an interviewer on the show. Come on, go for it.
The most annoying thing about Shai is that he always one-ups you in terms of being like the best person in the room, but it's completely sincere and genuine. He's never doing it to one-up you, but you're like, oh, I heard so-and-so was sick. I texted them. He's like, oh, I sent them flowers and dinner, and then I dropped by and I walked their dog. And you're like,
and they
come on, man. Yeah. You're just like, but it's completely sincere. So it's like, he's just like the best person in the room. And it's so irritating when you're his sibling.
Is he by any chance older than you?
5 years.
Yeah.
5 years older than me.
I'm the oldest. Yeah, I'm the.
But my question.
I like
for
this
you,
game. This is
I have
great.
I have a production related question for you, because you talk about, you're not making a chronological film, which I appreciate so much. I'm so much more interested in these character driven stories. I'm so much more interested in watching things unfold, in verite style. I absolutely. But what is that like for you in post-production then? If you're not writing your story before you go into it, you're not looking for specific moments of drama. I've worked on docs before. I know how they happen in pre-production and production. Then what is your editing process like?
It's an acute suffering for everybody involved.
I knew you were going to say that. There is no way it's not, but you manage it. But you manage it
miserable.
because it's
a horrible process, and it's even worse for the editors than it is for me. It's really hard work, and there were two iterations of this film. There was an earlier version which was called Prog Rock Pond Scum Set to Bum You Out, and that was basically made up of all of the good bits that I filmed on Tull with them. So it was about 5 minutes long. No, it was, but it just didn't have any narrative structure, and it got really discombobulating after a while, because it just was bouncing around. But it's funny, and it's like stylistically, it's really interesting, but it didn't really hold your attention. It was sort of like, that feeling you get if you've like been on Instagram or Twitter for too long. You're like, that's just an hour and a half gone, and I know nothing, after that, except that I'm perfectly capable of wasting my time.
Yes, we do know that feeling.
So it's a question. I think you've just got to you sort of deep dive into the experience of the thing that you're making a film about. And then you sort of you walk away with that, with your big bag of footage. And then you sort of, your thinking becomes more and more sophisticated the more and more you look at all this footage. And some things start to resonate for you, and other things you think they're, you sort of discard them because they're less important and they're not talking to sort of core themes. So I normally talk to an editor and sort of talk about roughly what I think, in particular in terms of the themes of the film, and time. Time is an obsession of mine anyway. And so I knew this film was about time in lots of different ways. And then of course there's a distinct link between time and death. So sort of, and obviously mortality, because Crimson's lost so many of its members. It's a huge part of what the band is now. To say nothing of the fact that a lot of its core audience are getting on as well. So they sort of, it's the theme of mortality is a very strong one. So, you talk to the editor about that, and then so certain clips have stronger resonance because they directly address those issues and so on. And then you work out your narrative themes, but not. I think at the risk of sort of sounding a bit sort of, mumbo jumbo about the whole thing, I think you sort of have to divine from the material what the film is going to be. And I think material slowly begins to tell you what the film is, and you try things and you put them together, and they either work or they don't, or they take you off into a different place. That's one of the great things about editing, is oftentimes you don't know the impact that putting two pieces of material together is going to have. But the key thing is to work with really, really great editors. The editor I had on this film, Ollie Huddleston, has worked with some fantastic observational directors like Kim Longinotto and Sean McAllister and so on. And so even though I'm 54, I think of myself as sort of quite a junior documentary maker. So I work with somebody who's worked with some of the best, and he's one of the best editors in the world. And so his kind of, his experience and the sort of number of solutions to problems that he's got at his fingertips, because he's done it for so long, they're sort of more than certainly many younger editors might have. And he also, he's just got a great sensitivity, and that to me is core of good filmmaking. If you're going to make films about people, is you just want to see real life human beings up on screen. I think that's why we go into the cinema, is we want to see ourselves reflected back in different ways by looking at how other people face their lives and experience their lives.
Wow. And I think in terms of mortality,
but the jokes are really what matter in the film to me.
They're well, that's a good segue to the jokier part of our podcast, because as you just give us this beautiful reflection on mortality, which really does, it really does thread through the film, including I guess was that Bill Rieflin's last interview or one of his last interviews? It was such a
I don't know, but it was the last interview, discussion, conversation.
Really, it was really special that you were able to capture that much with him during that time. I'm sure there are many people that are very grateful that you of the footage, and also the humor and the charm and the way he talked about this very difficult time was was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
That
I'm very grateful to him for giving me so much of his time and being so generous with it. You know, it was a privilege to spend time in his company.
So as we segue from the sublime,
From death into jokes.
Now we'll go into ridiculous. So as part of your storied history and your MTV history, you did work on TRL, correct?
I like to think of having sort of more in terms of me having invented TRL.
Oh, okay.
No, that's a joke. I worked on a program called MTV Live, which was a precursor to TRL.
Got it.
My understanding is that like they sort of MTV Live had some unplanned for chaos in it, some of which I might have been responsible for, and it was quite fun when it was chaotic, but most of the time it was like being trapped in an infomercial.
Okay.
And I was, to be honest, a lot happier to be out of it, and I certainly would not have been a happy bunny in TRL.
Okay. Well, then that's going to make this game even more delightful.
Okay,
so,
cool.
So we are now playing, because you're going to kind of get to retroactively wreak havoc on TRL then. We are going to play our signature game. Our signature game is called Buy, Rent, and Meh. That's the official rating system of the podcast. Buy being the highest, rent being, I would rent it like a video, and meh can be however you define your meh. It can be the lowest, it can be indifference, it can be mischievous. So we're gonna posit the following question to you, and each answer is allowed to have one of those values: the buy, the rent, or the meh. Okay.
All right.
So if you could go back, whether it's to TRL or to MTV Live, and you could program one of these 3 prog rock bands to play in that era, you know, in that peak era of MTV Live, okay? Whatever phase you want to pick. Here are the 3, okay? Jethro Tull, and it could be like codpiece and, you know, flute.
You can skip Jethro Tull. That's not going to happen.
Okay. Rush.
I couldn't agree more. But that's another conversation about things that annoy us about our brother. Making us listen to Jethro Tull for hours on end as children.
And then Rush, and Peter Gabriel era Genesis. So like dressed like plants and aliens and all that stuff. So which order would you enjoy? And the reason why you put them on, that's up to you. It could be to, again, wreak havoc. It could be because you actually think they'd play well, or because you'd like to educate the audience. But which one of those would be your top ranked, your buy to be on MTV Live or TRL?
I really hate Jethro Tull. I don't really know about Rush, but they always be busy. I was brought up by punks. I was too young to be a first generation punk, but I was sort of adopted by some first generation punks. So like all prog rock was the enemy when I was growing up. So it's difficult for me to accommodate any of these suggestions. However, Peter Gabriel, when he was fronting Genesis, looked like he was absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
So I would definitely buy Peter Gabriel period Genesis to perform live on TRL, because you wouldn't necessarily know what was going to happen, and it was the right kind of self-indulgent, I think.
That's amazing. All right, and now this is a less jokier question, but it does. It does go back to film, which is there are a few, I would say, I don't know if you qualify these as docs, but I would say rock movies, nonfiction rock movie. Well, maybe they are fiction, but depending on who you ask. But
it's all fiction, Shai.
Fair enough. Actually, you know what? You're right. These are all kind of in there. They are actually, now when I give you them, you're going to really say, yeah, these are fiction. The Last Waltz, Gimme Shelter, and Don't Look Back.
Not seen any of these films.
Really? Cool. All right.
I don't like documentaries.
That's amazing.
Well, also, I haven't for the last, I think, 3 years, I've not watched any rock documentaries in particular because I didn't want to. I want the film to be influenced by King Crimson. So I've tried to let that be the thing that's made the shape of it, rather than sort of. And the irony is, it's not a question of like if I'd seen any of those films or any, I mean, I have seen those music documentaries, but I just haven't seen any for a while, because I didn't want to have them in my head. Not only because I haven't got any problem stealing ideas from people, but it was more I didn't want to be influenced by them in terms of me going, I don't want it to be like that,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I've heard that Don't Look Back, I think, is the best of those ones. With regard to the Stones, there was the Stones one you mentioned in there.
Yeah, Give Me Shelter.
Yeah. Is that the one with Altamont in it?
Yeah, that's the one with Altamont.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if I've seen all of that, but I've definitely seen the really, the awful bit of it. So, and I remember the colours are really nice. So I'll say that, I guess, and then I'm not really qualified to talk about the other two.
Okay, all right.
Because I haven't seen them. So
that was my favorite answer. I love that was your answer, because I'm really just exhausted of pretending to have watched all the movies I haven't seen. I'm just kidding.
It's sort of like, I sort of spend a lot of time in the indie world, and there's all the awful kind of hierarchies and one-upmanship and stuff that go on, and it is one-upmanship. It's not one-up personship either in that world. And I'm like, it's like, it doesn't matter, it's, you either like it or you don't. And the great thing about music is, when it's at its best, you've got an unmediated response to it. You don't have to think about, like, does somebody else think that this is good or whatever. It's like, I like it, I don't care, There's that Kelly Clarkson song, Since You've Been Gone, which is absolutely amazing. And she, but she came into this sort of, she was, you couldn't imagine more of a cookie cutter approach to how, she appeared.
It's true. American Idol.
It's true. I'm opposed to all that kind of commodification and, trying to create machinery to make that. I was like, I can't. That song is amazing. It's just incredible, Sorry, I got off on a bit of a tangent there.
I'm just adoring. I'm adoring everything you're saying. I love everything you say. This is, yeah. You really, have like a.
You may say that, Becky, but I bet Shai loves everything I'm saying even more than
just
you.
A little bit more. Just a little bit more.
The reason why I love it, though, Toby, I want to say is that the biggest compliment you can give in our family is by trolling or dragging someone in just the right way. And your distaste for Jethro Tull is now going to become a legendary moment in this podcast, because here I am sitting down with a documentarian of one of the greatest prog rock bands of all time, and I drop my favorite prog rock bands, although it's a tie between Rush and Jethro Tull, and you were just like, eh.
Sorry about that.
No, it's great.
No,
it's
perfect.
It's perfect. I will be reminded about this forever. Toby Amies, you have made an incredible film. Everyone, I always tell people, even if you've never heard of the band, if it's a great film, it's going to be captivating. And
I have to be honest, I have never heard of this band. And when Shai said it's a rock documentary about a band that you've never heard of, about music that's just not on your radar, I was like, oh, homework. This is one of the best. I mean, this is without a doubt one of the best documentaries I've ever seen, and one of the best films I've ever seen. I was flipping out watching it. I am not kidding. I think this movie is truly phenomenal, and everyone should see it. And it feels everything you were just talking about throughout the whole interview about giving us the information if we don't know the band, and then it just being so much more deeper and richer than that, because it's not this chronological bullet point of the list of accomplishments. It's a much deeper, richer film than any music doc I've seen. So I can at least leave it there.
Really, really sweet of you to say thank you. I mean, they're an extraordinary band, and they're also an extraordinary group of people, So whilst this is by no means an easy film to make, that the raw material that I was working with was always there. That's the thing. Is that, like, that's why effectively, I felt able to make the film twice. If made the first version, I was like, it's not doing it. So we're going to have to start again but I knew it was there. You know, I just knew that I hadn't found it in the first instance. So, you know, that if there's a secret, it's, you know, it's in the casting. It's finding the right people to work with, I think. And they've also been a great organization to work with too. So, you know, their attitude has always been like, just make the art and we'll work out how to make it work after that. So that really means, but it means a lot to me. And it's also, you know, if you've been to any concerts with your brother, you might have noticed that the prog rock fans tend to be largely male. And so, but for me, this music is, it's not phallocentric, you know, necessarily. It's sort of, it is quite, you know, sometimes it does get a bit nerdy and so on, but there's a sort of passion to it that I think that when you're exposed to it in the right way really resonates in a way that I don't think people necessarily think of when they think of the genre. But Robert would be the first to sort of dismiss, you know, the notion that King Crimson were a prog band, because I think if he ever had any enthusiasm for the term at all, he was interested in it because it was progressive, you know, so the idea of change and so on. And I think when it becomes prog and it becomes a genre, there's a danger that it can sort of be set, you know, there's no change and there's no growth. And it's, you know, if you'll pardon the pun, it's like it's sort of been stuck in aspic. So, you know, I think that is something that maybe just it makes King Crimson distinct from many of the other bands in that genre. Is there is this sense of, you know, as Bill Bruford says, change is what the band is about.
Yeah, and you capture that, and you captured the deep value of that so beautifully. Well, Toby Amies, thank you so much for being here. In the Court of the Crimson King is now doing the festival thing, but where can people follow it so the moment it's available to the public they can see it?
I'm not sure we've launched it yet because I've been a bit too busy. But at the moment the best place is the Instagram account.
Got it.
Which is just ITCOTCK film. Then there's also a DGM site, King Crimson. It's King Crimson Twitter feed. So all of those things will be updated. But at the moment, the best place is the Instagram.
Terrific. Well, we'll make sure that's in our show notes. For all of our listeners, you can follow us at Friday Night Movie on Twitter and Instagram, FridayNightMoviePod.com. Lots of great South by Southwest content coming, not the least of which is this interview we were able to have with Toby Amies. Thank you so much to our guests for being here.